All right, boys and girls, I'm going to do something absolutely insane that is going to make me have to spend at least 2 years editing this video. And that is going to be talking about all the 2024 AFL trades and free agency moves and all that type of stuff. Again, if you guys could show some appreciation for me taking the time out of my day, probably going to be sweating while editing this video. Not because it's hard to edit, just because I'm a bit unfit. I mean, look at me. But if you want to show some appreciation, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for all the latest sports content and news and all that type of stuff. And you get to see this sexy face talk to you in a majestic voice while I talk AFL. We're starting off with the first move that happened 12 days ago. The Gold Coast Suns received Elliot Himmelberg, while the Adelaide Crows really received nothing. Not much going on there. Again, Josh Battle ended up becoming a Hawk. St Kilda got pick 8, which is pretty good for the Saints because we know if they didn't get a good pick, I think their president was going to go cry at the best and fairest again. So good on them for doing that. We also saw Harry Perryman go to the Pies as they try to improve their inside midfield depth, and GWS received pick 16 in compensation. Again, Perryman's usually a backman, but he was, I believe, actually drafted as a midfielder, and Collingwood are going to aim to play him in there to try and help out Nick Dacos. That's kind of the whole justification on why they signed him on big money to make that deal happen. Again, the Melbourne Football Club signed arguably the greatest player of all time in Tom Campbell from the St Kilda Football Club, where St Kilda were robbed and given no free agency compensation. Ridiculous from the AFL. It should have been pick 1 this year and pick 1 next year, because that is a tough player to lose. While Nick Haynes went to the Carlton Football Club, and GWS unfortunately received no compensation for him as well. Isaac Cumming decided to go to Adelaide instead of Port Adelaide, where the GWS Giants received the 21st overall pick. Again, a good move for the Adelaide Football Club that I think is going to strengthen an already good free agency and trade that they've had. They're going to be putting Isaac Cumming now. Rumour has it on the wing and a bit more in the midfield. He actually played as like a half-back, back pocket for GWS, but he's going to play more midfield as well. It's one of the main reasons he actually left the Giants, is to go and do that, similar to Harry Perryman. So he'll get his wish there, and I think he'll play some wing at the Adelaide Football Club. We also got the Alex Neil-Bullen deal getting done, where the Melbourne Demons received pick 28. Again, massive loss for Melbourne, because Alex Neil-Bullen is an extremely underrated player. And as I said, this adds to an already fantastic off-season that the Adelaide Crows are having. Jack Darling ended up going to North Melbourne, while West Coast received the 4th round pick in return, pick 67. Again, I guess North just want to squeeze the 0.2% of juice that is still left in Jack Darling's kind of old, very injured body. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to be a fun experiment to see. And I think every North fan is definitely excited and cannot sleep to watch that. Jack Graham ends up getting to West Coast, and Richmond received pick 42. Arguably an okay move by West Coast. I think people forget just how good Jack Graham was. He was a guy who finished second in their best and fairest one time, which is pretty interesting, and a guy who was touted as their future captain. He's just had about 888 different injuries, but he now gets to go play under Andrew McQualter, his former coach. So we'll see how that one goes and if he can get him back up to his best. A massive pick swap happened where Richmond got pick 20 and Brisbane got 32, 42, 43, and 45. Ended up being a great move for both parties. Now Brisbane can match the Levi Ashcroft bid as a father-son better in the draft due to the points, and Richmond ends up, having that pick 20. So great move by both teams there. Lions ended up landing a pick from the Blues, which ended up being 34 and 66 to the Brisbane, while Carlton received 73 and a future second. Not a whole lot going on there. Blues ended up getting pick 14 for Hawthorn's future first, or they sent Hawthorn, a future first and a future second. This would be really important because later on, we'd find out 14 would be used for pick 3, which I'll talk about in a second. Melbourne ended up trading away a third round. Well, they received the third round pick, in 46, while they traded away their future third to Adelaide. We know a big pick swap happened where Melbourne received a future first-round pick, currently pick 9, and a future third-round pick. Essendon received 2 second-round picks, currently 28 and 40, 2 third-round picks, 46 and 54, a extra third-round pick, 65, and a future first-round pick. In my opinion, this was a massive W by Essendon. The reason they did this is because they've got a couple of academy players, including that Keiko, supposed to go in the top 30. So they thought, why not? Let's just bring in the picks and whatnot we need to do this academy and bring in a first-round pick from a team in the Melbourne Demons who could be arguably on the downfall next year, with Petrarca being unhappy at the club, Clayton Oliver being unhappy at the club, and a ton of different things happening. Again, I know that a lot of Melbourne fans were a bit critical about this because it was like, you're giving up our first-round pick and we could be bad next year. But in saying that, we also know that Melbourne are realistically going to be getting picked 5 and 9 now in one of the best drafts and biggest depth drafts we've ever seen. So not the worst trade at all if you're doing and you're looking at it like that. A massive 3-team trade happened as well, where Richmond gave up Liam Baker and received pick 14. West Coast actually received Liam Baker, Matt Owies, a first-round pick, which was 12, and a fourth-round pick, 73. They gave up number 3 and 63 and 68, which went to Carlton, who gave up 14 and 12 and 73, and received back pick 3. This is a terrific move by Carlton. If you're wondering why they decided to bring in pick 3 as well, it is because they believe Richmond are a certain, near lock now to take Sam Lawler at pick 1, meaning that Finn O'Sullivan is going to not only slide to 2, but will probably slide to 3 as North don't seem as interested, meaning that Carlton now can take Finn O'Sullivan, arguably the best midfielder in the draft, at pick 3, who can add to that midfield and add some nice speed. So great move by them. We also saw one where Brisbane traded up and got pick 27, gave up 32 and 45 to the Saints. Good deal by both teams. That's just a win-win right there, I think. A massive 4-team trade, which I've talked about on this channel as well, which we're going to be going in right now. Again, there was a massive mega deal here that was between Collingwood, Gold Coast, and Port Adelaide that does have Collingwood getting Dan Houston and pick 58, Gold Coast getting John Noble, a 2025 first-round pick from Port Adelaide, a 2025 first-round pick from Collingwood, and pick 39, while Port Adelaide received Jack Lukosius, Joe Richards, Rory Atkins, pick 13, 29, 36, and 50. Again, I think it's pretty obvious, in my opinion, who lost this trade. I feel like there were 2 winners and 1 loser. And again, when you've got Port Adelaide's biggest fan who literally gets butthurt and cries on radio when anyone disses his team, shout out Kane Corns, I still love you deep down inside, saying that he thinks this trade is bad, you know this trade was bad for Port Adelaide. Again, unfortunately, as I've mentioned on the channel, I'm not the biggest Jack Lukosius fan. I think he's extremely weak. I think he lacks fight in the contest. It's the major reason Dimmer dropped him. I think it's the major reason Marbia Chol requested a trade and got out of there before Dimmer got in, because, again, he was a very weak player last season who lacked the contest. He got a bit better with Hawthorn this year. Jack Lukosius needs to do that at Port. I think Joe Richards is actually a really good pickup and a very good player. And Rory Atkins, again, God knows why Port Adelaide decided to try and cook and bring in Rory Atkins. He was, if it wasn't for his terrible contract that he's, still got, he would have been delisted. And then pick 13, 29, 36, and 50. It's a lot, but for a team who were really wanting 2 good first-round picks for Dan Houston, you get a middle-tier first-round pick in 13, and you don't get a second one, and then you have to give up your first-round pick next year. It's a little bit scary for me. As far as Collingwood and Gold Coast, I think Gold Coast are the major winners out of this deal. Getting John Noble in to help, obviously, Daniel Rioli, and a couple of the other players that they're getting here and there, as well as the draftees in Leo Lombard, is phenomenal and fantastic. They also get rid of Rory Atkins' contract, which was apparently not friendly. Lukosius' contract, apparently he was on $1 million a season. They get rid of both of those guys who, are not going to be in Dimmer's best 23. Let's be real here. And they bring in 2 first-round picks next year and John Noble, a really good role player. Plus, they still bring in semi-points and 39 to help with their academy and whatnot. I mean, yeah, Gold Coast did phenomenal here. Collingwood as well, it is a risky one for them. I know some fans are divided because they're not going to have first-round picks for last year, this year, and next year most likely. So that does hurt, but again, you bring in a 2-time All-Australian, arguably the best halfback in the league. So at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a good trade, and they should be contending for the top 4 next year. We also have the next trade, which is the more controversial one going around on the internet at the moment. Carlton getting pick 3, 63 and 68. Richmond getting 14. And West Coast getting Liam Baker, Matt Owies, 12 and 73. Again, obviously, Carlton did phenomenal here, getting pick 3 in. The reason I believe Carlton did this, and I think the reason a lot of people think that Carlton decided to go out and cook with this, was genuinely just because they heard that Richmond are apparently going to be taking Sam Lawler with the first overall pick. Again, I've got a video coming out about this on the channel very, very soon, so stay tuned for that. But he looks like the favourite for pick 1 now. Apparently, North Melbourne really loves Sam Lawler at pick 2 as well, and even they, I think, have realised he is at 1. So Carlton had heard this, and they're like, damn, Finn O'Sullivan's probably going to drop the pick 3. We can get arguably the best player in the draft to pick 3. We have to go and do this. And they decide to make the bold move to trade 12 and 14 to bring what could be a future AFL star into their team. So they did phenomenal here. Again, Liam Baker for pick 14. Would pick 14 in most drafts be better than Liam Baker? No. But in this year's draft, it's supposed to be one of the most stacked drafts in AFL history. Some reporters going as far as calling it the most stacked draft in AFL history. You're doing this every day of the week if you're Richmond. So, again, as a Tigers fan myself, I'm pretty happy with this. And I know West Coast are getting a lot of hate online and a lot of people saying this is a terrible trade for them. I don't know if I actually agree. I think, yeah, they're probably the losers out of this. But, again, I'm hoping I can be the voice of persuasion here for any West Coast fan who are thinking this is the worst trade in the world. I don't think it is. Liam Baker is an incredible player who I think will return a halfback for them next season. When he was playing at halfback for Richmond, he had near all-Australian type games. It's just that the only good thing about the Tigers were their halfbacks, so he had to move up the ground. Again, he's still a really solid midfielder, still a really solid forward. I think he should be played as a halfback at West Coast. They may play him in the midfield, though. You bring in Matt Owies, who, again, has had the knock on him that he can sometimes be lazy and go out of games. But he was still, like, one of Carlton's leading goal kickers this year. He can find a goal and would be one of the best goal-kicking small forwards in the game. So, realistically, if you do have Liam Baker as a small forward at times and Matt Owies as your other small forward, that would take you to being having one of the best small forward cores in the whole entire league straight away. And then again, pick 12. I'm sure West Coast have a player in mind at pick 12. Again, this is supposed to be one of the most stacked drafts. I'm assuming they've got a guy there, potentially homegrown talent, that they're really willing to go to. And we got to remember, they're still going to try and get other picks in this draft. So I don't think it's all a loss that they lost pick 3. At the end of the day, you potentially lose Finn O'Sullivan for Liam Baker, Matt Owies, and potentially a Luke Traynor, right? Probably not him. They maybe don't need another key back, but you guys get what I mean, right? I don't think it's the worst trade in the world. They're probably the losers still, but that's just because the other two teams did so well. Yeah, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world at all. Again, another one we got was Harry Sharp being traded along with the future third-round pick from Brisbane, where Brisbane actually received 49 and Essendon's 2025 third-round pick. Again, I don't really know too much about this trade. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I don't really care. Like I don't know. I was actually eating some KFC with my best mate today, who is a massive Melbourne fan, and again, he was telling me that he thinks they're just bringing in VFL players at this point. Shane McAdam, he wasn't a fan of. Harry Sharp, he's not that big of a fan of. So again, my best mate saying it's not a good trade as a massive Melbourne fan is probably a good indication that I should say it may not be that good. But again, I'll be honest here. I don't really know much about Harry Sharp. I know he played some games, and I guess he can't get a game in the best team in the league. Yeah, so he's looking for more opportunity. Melbourne are a team he's going to have that opportunity at. So it honestly makes a lot of sense. So obviously, not only did all of that happen, but deadline day ended up, of course, coming around, and here's what happened there. Being said that Bailey Smith and pick 45 get to Geelong, while Matt Kennedy and pick 17 get to the Dogs, Jack McRae gets to the Saints, and Carlton get pick 38. Again, this is a really, really weird one, considering the Doggies were like so strong on getting a second round pick, and even at one stage asking for 2 second round picks for Jack McRae. For them to settle on pick 45 is pretty crazy to me. Like, that's just the reality of things. I think, you know, the Doggies, of course, that 45 did end up getting moved to Geelong, and all of these trades shuffled around and whatnot. We see that at the end now, the Dogs get Matt Kennedy and pick 17, and I was vocal on this channel previously in one of the previous videos talking about how I don't think the Doggies should have gone for Matt Kennedy. I'm not exactly too sure if that was a good idea, but at the end of the day, they did lose Bailey Smith, an inside midfielder, Jack McRae, an inside midfielder, and Caleb Daniel, who is a backman, but you're bringing in some depth in Matt Kennedy, who fills in that inside midfield spot. The only thing is that McRae was barely in the team. Bailey Smith hadn't played all year. It's kind of like, well, yeah, I don't know how much they needed to do this. Pick 17 is a good return as well for Bailey Smith, who at times it was starting to look like the Geelong Cats were getting a little bit pissed off and we're going to walk this dude to the preseason draft. In terms of Carlton, again, getting pick 38 for Matt Kennedy is great, because as mentioned on this channel before, the reason they told Matt Kennedy to move on and look for a different team was not because Matt Kennedy's a bad player. It's just because their midfield was way too one-dimensional, and it was way too slow, way too easy to be figured out by teams. And you can tell they're looking to add some speed in there now by potentially bringing in a Finn O'Sullivan at pick 3 and doing a couple other moves. So again, this makes sense for them to clear some salary, but also get a pick back in return for a guy who probably wouldn't have been in their 22 next year, not because he wouldn't be good enough, just because he wouldn't have fit what their midfield was going to evolve into. Again, the next one, we've got the Hawthorn Football Club getting Tom Barrass and their future 4th round pick back, which is pretty funny, while West Coast ended up getting their future 1st from Hawthorn, the future 2nd from Hawthorn, and the future 3rd from Hawthorn. The Hawks deciding to keep Carlton's future 1st and not actually chuck in this deal, which means they are betting on themselves. Again, this is a fantastic trade because my eyes have kind of been open to why West Coast now were actually wanting future picks, and that's because they are obviously going absolutely all in for Chad Warner next year. Again, we know they're going to want to keep their 1st round pick next year. Let's just say they have pick 2 or pick 3, right? Something like that. They're not going to be wanting to trade their pick for Chad Warner if they're a chance to getting him. But it seems like they think they're a chance because they're bringing in these future assets to make it happen. Again, they're probably going to be offering now that Hawthorn future 1st, their own future 1st, all of that type of stuff to try and get Chad Warner. But at the end of the day, the goal was to keep their pick next year, which I don't think they're going to be wanting to par with. Again, Tom Barrass gets to Hawthorn. They're just setting themselves up to be a Super Bowl favorite, man. That's just the reality of things. Yeah, they're a big chance at winning the flag next year. Getting in Battle and getting in Barrass to help out that back line is kind of like sex on a stick. I'm not going to lie. They've done a really good job there. We've also got Caleb Daniel going to the North Melbourne Football Club for pick 25. Oh my God. I mean, the Dogs cooked here. Like, the Dogs absolutely cooked here. You know that video of Gunner riding down? He's cooking something great. That's what the Dogs did on this trade. I mean, they kind of fleeced North Melbourne. I'm not going to lie here, but also if you're looking at it and you're a North Melbourne fan, I don't think Caleb Daniel's that good, but in reality, like some of you guys have said, Caleb Daniel is a great veteran, a great leader who is going to push the standard at training and push these younger kids to be a lot better footballers And for his first year, he might still be in there 22, and I guess they'll see how they go from there. Again, there's still some people who genuinely believe out there that Caleb Daniel can be a good defender in the right system. So maybe that's where North Melbourne are trying to go for this. Again, the other one, Jake Stringer, going to GWS for pick 53. It's a whatever trade. I think a lot of Essendon fans were really fed up. I know this one Essendon guy who thinks the whole entire roots of Essendon's problems from the last 30 years have just been Jake Stringer. He hates him that much. The reality is this is a good trade for the fans who don't like Jake Stringer, but also a good trade for GWS, I guess, who are looking to bring in some depth for the other players they lost, like James Peatling, Harry Perryman, and Isaac Cumming. You're bringing in a guy here who at least has played a lot of senior footy and can maybe help out the team potentially here and there. So I guess a good trade in the end, but yeah, I don't know. We also got the trade that sent Luke Parker and Jacob Constanti, something, I don't know, for pick 44. This is one of those ones as well that I felt like North, they actually did really well here. I mean, Sydney probably could have got something better than pick 44 for Luke Parker. I mean, if 25 got sent for Caleb Daniel, Luke Parker is literally a way better player than Caleb Daniel. So that's a really interesting trade and how that works. The other Jacob Kitty dude, he was going to get delisted anyway, so he's just been thrown into this trade as an extra add-on. We also got the Adelaide Crows receiving James Peatling, future third and a future fourth, and they gave up their future second. Again, Adelaide cooked here. I've got a video coming out very soon about how I think Adelaide have just really dominated this offseason, had one of the best off-seasons they've had in a very long time, quite frankly, and they do really well in this trade. I guess GWS, they're bringing in assets for a man who I think was a mid-season draft pick, and it's a good asset in that future second-round pick. So even though there's still a chance Adelaide are bad, that could be a good pick for them. I think Adelaide will actually now climb the ranks next year because they're building a really solid foundation there. Gold Coast, of course, traded pick 6 and 23 for Daniel Rioli, 51, 61, 70, and 76. This, to me, is possibly the most win-win trade here. I think both clubs benefit really good out of this. Daniel Rioli is Richmond's best and fairest winner. He is Richmond's best player, if we're not counting a healthy Tom Lynch, probably. 6 and 23, they bring in who can hopefully help this new next wave of young kids going forward and be that next wave. While, again, Daniel Rioli, he could be an All-Australian player at Gold Coast. He's been knocking on the door for the last couple years at halfback for Richmond. If he played in a better outfit this year, he could have very well been in that All-Australian contention. I think Gold Coast, he will fit so well into that Damien Hardwick game style, and we saw what Dimmer turned him into in 2022. This is a much more experienced Rioli now at halfback. I'm scary to see what that's going to look like. And those 4 third and fourth round picks, again, you can now use them to match your academy players like Leo Lombard, etc. So this is a massive win-win for both teams. Both teams do really well out of this. And then, of course, the last one, Shea Bolton, pick 14, a future third, get to the Fremantle Football Club, while Richmond, of course, get back in 10, 11, and 18. I'm going to have to kind of give the edge to Richmond in this trade. They really got what they want in the end in that 10 and 11, while also getting in an 18. 3 first-round picks for 1 first-round pick and an elite small forward. But don't get me wrong, the reason Freo slightly overpaid in this deal is because they are bringing in the best small forward of 2022, a top 5 small forward of the last 3 years, and a guy who you know is going to double his gameplay when he is under a key forward, which he hasn't been the last 2 seasons. Not just that, Freo want to win a premiership. They want to win their first premiership, and this could be the tilt that helps them potentially go and do it. He is an amazing pickup for the Fremantle Football Club, and they still keep a first-round pick in 14, which they can use in the draft to really do whatever they want. So it makes sense. It does hurt a lot for Richmond to see probably their near best player of 2022 and a top 3 player for them go. But at the end of the day, those 3 first-round picks, you should hopefully bring in a guy with at least one of those picks who will be a top 5 to top 10 player for you guys for the next couple of years. And that's not even talking about if they hit on all of them. So we'll have to definitely wait and see. Again, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment all of your thoughts and opinions on this all down below. What are you guys' thoughts and opinions on the last trade day of the deadline and whatnot? I'd very much like to know. Subscribe to my gaming channel and my IRL/vlogging channels. Links for them will be in the description down below. And I guess I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.